Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here and to be able to speak with you all. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you about the bright data future that I'm working on. And I know a lot of the technologists who are on this conference are also working towards. So thank you. And I'm just going to move the presentation. Again, I'm very happy to be asked to speak here to this organization of ad tech professionals, the best and brightest in ad tech in Latin America. And we are particularly, everyone here at the Lotame team are very excited to talk about the future and what we expect to see in the next year or two in the advertising technology space. But before we go into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic. And like I said, I thought the introduction to this conference was really great about all of the positive ways in which we are adapting to the global pandemic. And one of those things, of course, is this conferencing solution. We're working out the bugs, but this is a really powerful tool that will enable us all to do a lot more communicating and a lot more sharing of ideas across the world now that we have figured out how to do digital or virtual conferencing. And also the way in which we've all changed our lives to work from home, to care for our children, and to educate our children at home. I know for my part, I have had a really interesting time figuring out how to be a teacher as well as a father. So what I would like to do is to ground my talk today about the future of advertising technology. I'd like us all to think about what the pandemic has done for our lives, how it's changed our lives. I'd like you to take 3 minutes to write down, take a pen and a piece of paper and write down the answers to the following questions as they pertain to you and your experience. So question number 1, which connections strengthened over the last 6 months? Which of your connections with your friends and family or whomever were strengthened, were encouraged during the pandemic? And then which connections were lapsed or tested or strained or broken? Think about what connections that you had with others that were broken. And finally, what important lessons you've learned about your connections. The theme of this conference is connection, or Conecta. And I'm going to be talking a lot about connections and specifically in our industry, but I think it's important that we all ground ourselves in our own personal experience. So go ahead and answer those questions, and I'll give you 2 minutes to do so. I'm just going to leave them here on the questions right here so you can see them. All right. So now that you've taken a moment to think about what connections in your life were changed by the pandemic, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how my life has been affected so that we can ground our talk today in the personal experience and make the connection between personal and business. So on March the 18th of 2020, this year, I lived in New York City. And my son was enrolled in school, and my wife was in a production. She's a theater actress. And I was working for Lotame. Well, on March 19th, New York City shut down, and schools were closed, and all of the theater productions were closed. And we were asked to stay in our apartments and not leave unless it was absolutely necessary. I think you all have the same experience. We all experienced that same thing. So I found myself in a very interesting situation. Firstly, we had our son in our home. He's 5 years old and very rambunctious, so that was an interesting thing. We had a small apartment. It was a challenge. Also, one of us wasn't working anymore, and we weren't permitted to go see our friends. So a lot of the reasons why we were in New York City were suddenly very difficult to justify. So we decided, boy, let's think about where we should move. So we knew we had to move, but where should we go? And we thought about what connections were important to us. And we decided that our family connections were the ones that were most important to us. And so we moved close to family. That just happens to be, for me, in rural Georgia. For those of you who know the United States or don't know the United States, Georgia is a very different place than New York City. And so I'm in a totally new place. I live in a new place. It's wonderful, but it's a dramatic change from where I used to live in New York City. So the things that I learned were what's important to me, being connected to family, and also being out in nature. So now that we've talked about our own personal experience and thought about that, don't worry, we're going to come back to the things that you wrote. So let's talk about our advertising, our industry, and why connections are so important in our industry. Because we've realized in this pandemic that connecting to each other is vital. And what does that mean for our industry? Well, Lotame and my team believe that the future of advertising technology, both because of a lot of things, is people-based, privacy-first, and open to all. I'm going to repeat that a number of times during my talk so that we can make sure that you guys understand what I'm talking about. So we believe that the future of advertising is connected. It's people-based, it's privacy-first, and it's open to all. So what do I mean by that? Well, first, let's talk about what's going on in our industry. I think we all understand that there are a lot of different pressures coming at us. Privacy regulations from Europe, Brazil, California, and other places are putting strain on the connections between our devices, us as people, and our various ad tech players. Chrome has announced that they may get rid of the third-party cookie. The Apple iOS is going to deprecate the IDFA. And the walled gardens, what we call the walled gardens on our side, what's that mean? It means Facebook, Amazon, and Google, who have logged in users and very enclosed environments. They are using privacy regulations as an excuse to further close themselves off and solidify their market control. So there's some pressures on us. But Lotame, and I think a lot of the independent ad tech players who are in this conference and agencies who are here, and even people, I think we can all lean into these challenges. And if you're a sailor, what I mean by that is tack into the wind, towards the wind, and leverage these winds for our benefit to propel us into the future. If you listen to the media, I think partly because they need to make good headlines, they make it sound like everything's going away, that the advertising industry, ad tech in general, is going to be going away. But that's not the case at all. In fact, independent advertising technology platforms are the only way we're going to progress. There are so many reasons for this, and I'm going to talk through a few of them. So we believe that the future of advertising technology is connected. It's people-based, it's privacy-first, and it's open to all. What does people-based mean? What do I mean when I say people-based? People-based, for those of you who are brand marketers in this conference, you already speak in this language. You say, I'm advertising to a person. I'm building a relationship with a person. I'm attempting to convince them to be loyal to my brand as a person. I'm not talking to devices. These are not people. But for those of you who are in advertising technology and in publishing, you know that the way we transact, the way we communicate between platforms and as transacting between data and data targeting, media, is via these devices: browser cookies, iOS IDFAs, Android IDs, etc. Well, we know that that is not the full picture of our consumers. And Lotame is investing in a future that's people-based by getting out, by working on an identity solution that aggregates all of the devices together into people-based clustering so that we can see the full view. Right now, if I'm a publisher, for example, and I am locked and I decide that I'm only going to look at what's on my what they've done on my property. So on my domain, this consumer has come to my domain and I see only a part of what they do online. I see that they visit the real estate section and they visit the section on automobiles. So I know that maybe they're interested in automobiles and maybe they're interested in real estate, but that's not the full picture. Well, what Lotame is doing, along with many partners and many people in the ad tech ecosystem, is we're working hard on an identity solution that clusters devices together, both first-party cookies, third-party cookies, Android ad IDs, IDFAs, IDFVs, OTT devices, and others. By clustering all these signals together at the individual, we're able to give a fuller, more robust view of the consumer. There's the first-party data view, which is the publisher's view. There's the authenticated user view, for those of you who know LiveRamp as a service or some other email service where authenticated users log into a website and then the logged in ID, the email really, is used as a vehicle for data and information. That's a capability that a lot of folks in advertising technology use. So they'll add their first party view and then they'll add a little bit of information about what it means once they've authenticated. And Lotame is building on those two things and adding IDs. We're building a universal ID like several other players in the industry. In fact, we have built it. It's deployed. So we have built a universal ID that clusters the various devices together and gives our customers a robust, full person view of all of the things they do on the internet. The capabilities, it allows for attribution, campaign optimization, frequency capping, etc. by the individual. The data model that brand marketers use and have used for a long, long time. So we believe that the future is connected, people-based, privacy first, and open to all. I talked about what people-based means. Let me talk about what privacy first means. Right now in Europe, GDPR is maturing, and the initial laws that hit the books have begun to meet the real world and the way in which people manage their privacy and how it affects their interactions with other companies is developing. What we're learning is that the central controlling apparatus of data privacy is the individual. It's the person. It's not the devices or the device manufacturers or the browser companies. It's the individual who controls their data privacy. Think about your own life. You are the one who controls your data. You're the one who wants to know who knows what about you. And right now, the big companies, we call them the walled gardens, Google, Apple, and Facebook, are blocking our ability to control our own data by obfuscating when data is being tracked, but allowing it to be tracked within their individual properties and not cross-platform. They block the ability from a publisher to understand what data privacy they're collecting for their users, but also if I'm an individual and I want to know who knows what about me, you must go multiple times to all of the various different places, all of the different publishers, all of the different devices. And you must go and opt out or opt in or figure out what data they have on you. This is not optimal. GDPR says that the individual is the node of control for privacy. That the individual must be able to see it, meaning it has to be transparent, to control it, meaning to turn it off, turn it on, and also to have access so they can pull it down or request a full file whenever they want to. That means the individual's in charge. Right now, browser companies like Chrome and mobile companies like Apple are blocking this. And a lot of lawyers and others in the industry believe that this is not privacy compliant. Even though these companies say they are making these decisions in order to protect our privacy, they are actually just solidifying their market share and shutting down the ability for the open web. Lotame firmly believes this is the wrong move, and we have built a solution, a cross-platform, cross-browser solution that that clusters devices together and propagates privacy through the individual. So what we're trying to say is, right now, I go to my favorite website, here it is, and I say, I agree that I will accept cookies from this website. But then I go tomorrow and it asks me again. Well, why is that? Well, because Safari or Chrome are beginning to block the ability for you and the publisher to have a persistent relationship. So every day you must do it again. Yes, I accept today. And again tomorrow, and again and again and again. This is a bad customer experience, as I think most of you already understand, but also bad for privacy. Working Group 29 out of GDPR has said that a persistent identifier for the individual is the best way to track and respect privacy signals on the internet, and that is what Lotame has built. It's our Panorama ID works the way consumers think it does. You opt out once on Monday, for example. We propagate that privacy signal through all of the devices that we know about, and we let all of our partners know that you have opted out. Google, MediaMath, Trade Desk, and others. We're connected to over 40 DSPs and SSPs across the industry. Your browser is opted out, your mobile phone is opted out, and even your connected television. The Panorama ID permits customers to and our ad tech partners to propagate consent and have it work the way consumers think it should. So Lotame believes that the future is connected, privacy-based, people-based, privacy-first, and open to all. I talked about people-based, the idea that Panorama, the work we're doing with our identity solution clusters devices together at the individual. I talked about our privacy-first approach, which says that once those things are clustered together, we propagate privacy and consent across all of the devices. We propagate it at the individual and give the individual control. Now let's talk about what I mean when I say open to all. Right now, we're at a time in which the internet is being, out of fear, I believe, and out of the effort to solidify market share on the open web, many companies have decided to take an approach that shuts down the open web. But Lotame and many of our ad tech partners believe that the open web is web by and for all its users, not select gatekeepers or governments. And that's the Mozilla Foundation. We are in agreement with this take. We think that privacy should be something that is controlled by the individual, not by Apple or Google or any other large entity. So when right now there is a decision in the ad tech ecosystem where some folks are deciding that only the walled gardens, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, will be permitted to know about individuals and to have the depth of information about an individual because they're authenticated users. They see everything that that person does. And that the rest of the open web will be shut down. Essentially, no one will ever have any data about an individual or know anything beyond what they see in their own domain. But this is not the future that Lotame has built and is investing in. We believe that the web needs to be open, that connections, that we should be able to transact on a persistent identifier for individuals that's people-based, privacy first, and open to all. Now, to make my case for the open web, I want to go back to our exercise that we started at the beginning, where we all looked at what happened during the pandemic, what connections were very important to us, which ones were lapsed or strained or broken off entirely, and what did we learn from that? So I want you to think back to that exercise, think about those connections that you really cared about, those connections that fell away and what you learned. And now imagine that that the open web, or that all of those connections were gone, that you weren't able to get on the internet and connect with those people, that you couldn't get on the phone. Can you imagine how much more difficult this pandemic would be if we weren't able to connect with each other and share information, call each other on the phone, do video chats? Human beings need to connect. And the point I'm trying to make is that an open web, one that's transparent, that shares information, that permits the individual to control their own data and control their own privacy, is the only way to keep the open web as robust and powerful as it should be. Lotame believes the future is connected, that it's people-based, it's privacy first, and it's open to all. And I encourage all of you to engage us in a conversation about that. We know there are a lot of points of view on the internet. We know that a lot of people are dealing with the issues that I've raised during my talk today and have different takes on it, different opinions about it, and we would love to talk to you more about it. We've built a solution that connects the internet in a people-based, privacy-first, and open-to-all method, but we'd like to hear from you on what you think the best way forward is as well. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for being patient through our technical difficulties. And again, any questions at all, please reach out to myself or my colleagues from Lotame. Thank you very much. We've built a solution that connects the internet.
Hi, Pierre. We have some questions for the audience. Okay, the first question is, what is the most disastrous consequence of not respecting consumer privacy? What should companies expect?
That's a great question. Thank you very much. The disastrous consequences. That's a really good question. I think that's already been proposed by the recent suit that was filed against Salesforce and Oracle. I think it's a $10 billion damages. The $10 billion are based on privacy breaches and the idea that data was sold for those individuals or on those individuals, and they didn't get paid on it or paid back. That's an extraordinary premise and also a very big penalty. Most of the lawyers and legal minds that are looking at the Oracle if there are damages, or it does that they face, will be small. The thing there is that this is based on the users are Hi, sorry again. I appreciate that. So the devastating consequences, that's a really good question. I'll repeat the question again. So the question was, what do we think the most devastating consequences of privacy breaches might be? And I think that question has already been answered. It can be a lot of financial penalties. I think those suits will be brought by people and entities against companies that can afford to pay those fines. So we assume that the small independent companies who don't have a lot of money won't be sued, at least not right away. But the important bit there is that the suit is based on a user not having control over their data. That's very important. The suit makes a case that says, because I am not able to opt out across all of the synchronization partners that Oracle and Salesforce use, or I'm not able to say, what data do you have on me, and then get a full file of everybody who has information on me, I believe the data is out of my control and that you're not respecting my privacy. So Lotame, again, the solution we have built answers for that and says, when you make an opt-out request or ask us what data we have on you, we can give you all of the data across all of your devices and all of our synchronization partners. This is a very important capability, and one that is in line with many of the interpretations of the GDPR law. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Pierre. We have one more question. How will publishers deal with this appearance of third-party cookies?
Wonderful. Great question. The important bit to think about is that third-party cookies are not third-party data. They're very different things. A third-party cookie is actually a poor technological hack that was used because we needed to have a way to track users. The fact that the third-party cookie is going away is good news for technology. The solutions that will replace it, like our Panorama ID or other universal IDs, will make tracking users more persistent, more privacy aware, and more accurate. Third-party cookies going away are a good thing for publishers. They will need simply to invest in or acquire universal identifiers like the Panorama ID that will help them transact on people-based signals and buy and sell on people-based IDs. Some of the vendors out there, like LiveRamp or LiveIntent or others, provide an authenticated user ID that can be transacted upon, and other vendors like Lotame provide a universal ID that can be bought, sold, and transacted on.
Thank you so much. We have the last question, and the question is, where do digital marketing companies that blend paid advertising onto Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. stand on privacy, whereas they tailor their strategies using consumer-specific data, opportunity, or threat?
It's a great question. It's a lot of questions in one question. The important thing to think about is that I have a very particular point of view. But if I were to take the marketer point of view, I think marketers have found that Facebook and Google and others are very effective channels, that placing advertisement spend in those channels works very, very well. The problem is it only works there. And in order to get a good, full view, robust view, fully manifest, meaning everywhere a person goes on the internet, a marketer needs to use other platforms and use other publishers. But how do they tie their Facebook spend to their Google spend, etc.? If we don't invest in a persistent people-based identifier across the internet that is cross-channel, cross-device, cross-domain, there will be no way to tie those various spends together and understand what is working and what is not working. And you have to trust the various channels. So I encourage all the publishers and brand marketers to invest in persistent people-based identifiers that are cross-channel, cross-domain, and cross-device. In fact, there's an organization called PRAM, the Partnership for Responsible and Addressable Media. That's a group of brand marketers, the biggest in the industry, along with DSPs, SSPs, and Google as well. And they have all agreed to build out a privacy solution that is people-based and privacy-forward and open to all. We don't know if it will manifest, but the point that they are trying to make is that they need a solution like that. In fact, the whole industry does. So I encourage everyone to invest in solutions that persist identification through channel, through domain, and through device, so that we can continue to make money and support the open web.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Now we have another question. And the question is, which would be the most adequate way to migrate from third-party data operations to first-party data insights and the trend discovery, such as inbound, CRM, customer data platform? The question is from Carlos Solares. Thank you so much, Pierre. Now
Great. We don't recommend that you migrate to first-party data only. I think the point I'm trying to make in my presentation, Carlos, is that first-party data only strategy is very narrow and won't be successful in the long run. We see a lot of publishers flying to the idea that their first-party information, where someone navigates on their website or what they read there, is going to be sufficient for marketing, but it won't be from the marketer's perspective. They want to be able to track users across domain, across device, and across channel. So we don't recommend that you go to a first-party only strategy. In fact, what we recommend you do is invest in a first and third-party data strategy that permits marketers to see their spend across channel, across domain, and across devices.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Let me tell you that we have many questions more and we have time. So maybe it's good that we can continue with one more question.
Okay, great.
The question is, do you know any solution for this new world without third-party cookies?
Well, they call that question a softball because it was thrown up and now I can just swing at it. The solution that's out there that Lotame has built is called the Panorama ID. It is a pre-bid module, so it sits in the header wrapper of a publisher page. It produces an individual identifier whenever anybody navigates to a website. That individual identifier is the aggregation of all their browser cookies, all their devices, even their OTT device. So if you're an OTT device, you can hit our API and get the Panorama ID as well. So the solution we've built is a Panorama ID that's a pre-bid module. It's an API that you can pull down with the individual ID. And we're using those two capabilities to permit data providers to aggregate data at the individual, publishers to push the individual identifier into an ad call, SSPs to package individual identifiers together with data into deal IDs, and finally DSPs to read those individual IDs being passed in from a publisher and use data passed in from data providers to target more effectively. That solution, an individual identifier available in a pre-bid module as well as an API, facilitates the entire ecosystem transacting on an individual identifier. Further, as I've said before, that individual identifier propagates privacy through all of the devices. So anyone comes to your website, says, I would like to opt out from tracking, we propagate that signal through all their browser cookies, their devices, and their OTT device. So Panorama ID is a solution Lotame has built, and I highly recommend giving it a whirl.
Thank you so much. We have one more question. Users are getting more aware of their lack of privacy because of the way their data used to be used. How can you gain their trust again so they are agreed to share their data with you?
That's a fantastic question. I think there's two components of the answer to that question. One is the value exchange question. What value am I getting in exchange for my data? I don't think that anybody on the internet fools themselves into thinking that they're getting all of this wonderful content for totally free. There must be some reason why I'm getting all this wonderful information and content. And it's because I'm permitting people to advertise to me. So publishers and others in the internet need to make the case to consumers about the value of their data and saying, you're agreeing to be tracked and targeted so that you can get the value that I offer you in terms of my content and capabilities. And then the other part of the answer is transparency. I think people want to just know what's going on. Right now, if I'm a user and I use Safari, for example, or Firefox, or if in the future when Chrome shuts off the third-party cookie, or when the IDFA goes away, there will be no way for me as a user to understand where my data is going each individual time I visit a website. I go to the publisher site, that data does something, but I don't know because I'm not able to track it because my browser cookie disappears and I won't be able to go ask them what happened to it. And then the next day it happens again and again. And no matter where I go, I am kept in kind of a black box of where my information is going. Now, is there somebody capturing my data? Yes, it's Safari. Is there somebody making money from my data? Partially the publishers, but then also Safari and Apple. So my data is still being used and monetized, but I have no view on it. So the answer to the question is the value exchange and the transparency. We must give users an ability to see what's going on with the data that we're capturing on them, and to be able to go in and say, well, who has my information and what information do they have? And turn off or on or block it all, erase it all, put it all back in, change it. I think one of the things that some folks have been asking about is whether I can go in and say, you know what, I keep getting these advertisements about baseball, but I hate baseball. Please stop advertising. That would be a great thing to be able to do if users would just go in and say, I don't want that. So transparency and control on one side, and then the value exchange on the other.
Thank you so much, Pierre. We don't have more questions, and you have a few minutes more to finish your conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you want to tell us some conclusions, you have a few minutes more.
Okay, great. So I guess I went too fast. I hope I didn't speak too fast for all of you. Conclusions. I think what I am understanding from the questions that have come through on this particular presentation is the kind of thing that I want to make sure I stress. Privacy regulations and the headwinds of the cookie deprecation and IDFA are driving a lot of people, publishers, and some agencies in particular, to the first party only use case. The CDP or CRM meets first party data only use case. The thing I would like to make sure that people understand is that that is not a viable solution for the future. It's closed, it's disconnected. No one will be able to translate between domains and between devices or browser cookies. Everyone will be transacting in their own individual closet of information, which in some cases will be valuable, but it won't be connected and it won't be transparent to the user. The conclusion I'd like folks to come away from this presentation with is that when we're thinking about how the open web, the open web in which publishers make money in exchange for advertising, and in which users can navigate and get content and learn things, and the information highway we all know and love, in order to maintain that and make it robust and competitive, we need to invest in solutions that connect us, that make sure that we are sharing information with each other in a, like I said, people-based, privacy-forward, and open to all methodology. So that's the conclusion of my talk. I know I have 3 minutes and a half, but perhaps I could give that time back to the conference, or if folks want to take a break and get some coffee.